I think it's time we should now make a start, as it's nearly 25 to 8. Um, Tonight we were asked by Transport for Wales if we would hold a second meeting with them, and they wanted to talk to people locally to explain about the work they were going to do before it started. Um, we are going to record the session tonight, so I'm just telling people that in advance, because one or two people in the past haven't realised that that would be happening, but we do record these sessions, so I hope people have no objections to that. Tonight we've got 3 people from Transport for Wales, Helen Dale and Andrew Galt, who are going to talk, and Kelsey, who was here last time, Kelsey Barcinella, I think is going to take notes for them. We didn't intend to take notes this time, as we said, but we have got recordings, and I did receive 6 questions which have been passed over to Transport for Wales to answer. So without any further ado, I will hand over to either Helen or Andrew, whoever's going to start first.
That would be me. Thank you very much, David. So if I can introduce myself, I'm Helen Dale. I am the Stakeholder Manager for South East Wales. So my role essentially enables a two-way channel of communication between Transport for Wales stakeholders and communities. So I've got 2 colleagues here with me today. Do you want to introduce yourselves and your roles?
Yeah, of course, I'll go first, that's okay, Andy. So I'm Kelsey Barcinella, and I'm the Community Engagement Officer for South East Wales, and I work alongside Helen, and we're a team of 2 within the Stakeholder and Community Engagement team for Transport for Wales.
Thanks, Kelsey. My name is Andrew Galt, and I'm the Principal Contractor Manager for AMI Infrastructure Wales. Part of that duty that I carry out is looking after all of the various principal contractors that we have working within the project.
Oh, thank you for that. So we're here from 7:30 to 8:30 today to provide you with an update on the Morganstown compound site and an update on the vegetation management on the city line. So if you bear with me a second while I remember how to use Zoom and share my screen for a presentation. Oh, at the moment, I'm not able to share my screen.
I've just granted you that permission, Helen, so you should be able to now.
Excellent, thank you very much. Please let me know when you can see it.
That's great, that's coming through now.
Excellent. Okay, brilliant. So we're here to provide you with an update on the Morganstown compounds. So during January, we held a public feedback exercise where we asked the community to give their views and opinions on our proposed work. So we were really pleased to have 82 responses, and Kelsey's role was to look through those and make sure that all those points that were fed back were considered and factored into our decision-making process. So 85% had concerns with the site location. So things around how that would impact the community, the football pitch, skate park, and the access road. So 24% raised concerns on some of the environmental impact relating to the site location. So things like, you know, what are we going to be doing to protect the wildlife and habitat and protection of the mound. 58% raised concerns regarding the use of a green site rather than a brown site. And this will lead me nicely into the update that I'm going to provide. So here you can see 3 different proposed area layouts that have been factored in, and I'll go through each to show the design changes. I think what I really want to reiterate is that we listening to our communities is really important to us, and you were able to raise your concerns. We listened and we made sure that we impacted our decision making around those concerns. So if you can see pre-December 2020, if you can see my cursor moving, we were taking a considerable amount of land that did impact the football pitch. So after a meeting with Radyr Rangers and listening to the views and the concerns, in January, we reduced that footprint so that it wouldn't impact the football pitch, but you can see that it still had quite a considerable area that would be taken for the compound. So again, taken into further consideration, communities' concerns and issues, you can see here that we were considering taking a further half of what we were proposing in January away from that site as well. So the latest update we have demonstrates even more how we've taken on board the issues. And this will take us into the next slide. Oh, there we go, sorry. So as you can see, we have this, this is our new proposed area layout, which you know, we can highlight various site benefits. So at the moment, we are only taking a very small triangle off the area where Radyr Rangers train. So we, you know, their training space won't be affected. There won't be any issues for pitch preservation because most of the area that is needed will be available. With that in mind, there won't be an impact on the space for your annual fete, which I know is really important to the community and stakeholders. And it will take away the need for additional play-in training space where potentially there could have been costs associated for the football club. And you know, one of the biggest things is that there's less impact on the site by moving from a green to a brown site, which leads me to the next update about how we've been able to reduce the size of that particular compound. Okay, so working with TfW Community Council, we've been able to identify a new proposed area at the Rhys Davies site. So this location provides a brown site, and this is because the recent administration of Rhys Davies. So because we've got this site available to us, the transformation compound will be reduced and the railroad access point will be installed at Rhys Davies site instead. So it will be roughly here, if you can see my cursor moving. We are currently discussing plans with TfW Community Council, and we're just awaiting confirmation really that the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted, and we can move forward with our compound plans. Okay, so traffic management was a big issue that was raised by the community. So we've recently held meetings with various senior members of the project team to compile an integrated traffic management plan for dealing with vehicles and pedestrians. And we are at the moment reviewing our planned numbers. The proposed new site at Rhys Davies in TfW would also mean that our vehicle movements would be reduced, with a lot of our HGVs being situated there instead of this site. Deliveries would include weekdays and weekends, but we are working with the community, the stakeholders, and the business in the area to ensure that we are satisfying everybody's needs. Once we have these plans in place, they will be shared with local stakeholders. And we're just waiting for all those plans to be finalised, and we'll be able to share details with stakeholders closer to the end of the month. So, some community benefit. So you're aware that we'll be building new changing facilities at Radyr Rangers, and we're working with them and the community council to see how we can progress with how else that could benefit the community. So we know that I mentioned your annual community fete is really important to you, and we would love to be able to help and support in any way that we can at that event. We've been working closely with CADU and the council on the Mott and Bailey signage, making sure that area is protected when we are taking forward our work, and also ensuring that we've got some lovely signage to add to the heritage. When people are visiting, that there's the signage is there and telling the story. We've also got improvements to Pooh's access road to the car park, which will be maintained throughout. And our community engagement officer, Kelsey, has been planning fantastic STEM outreach and biodiversity programs for schools across Radyr. So things like the Alan Griffith Bridge to Schools program, where they take a bridge into school and kind of learn how a bridge is built and construction and teamwork and project management, and working on the biodiversity project, which we were recently successful in gaining funding from the Lottery Heritage Fund, to look at how we can increase biodiversity in the area by things like building bat boxes, providing planters, anything that we feel can benefit the particular communities that we're working in. So I'll hand over to Andrew, who will take you through a little bit of information on Gelynis Bridge.
Thank you, Helen. So as I'm sure you are all aware, we handed in our planning application into Cardiff City Council just post, probably it was January the 4th, I think, just after the Christmas and New Year break. We have obviously had some feedback from some local residents, that I'm sure some of them are yourselves, and we've identified a few of the key topics that we believe, and I'm sure you believe as well, you would like to discuss. So as you can see, there's some of the ones that we've picked up actually within the application itself, is looking at the scale, the size, and the gradient of the bridge. And we can go into this in more detail a little bit later if we wish, but we are working within the allowable parameters that we have within the current design manual for roads and bridges. And we are making sure that we understand that the actual gradient of the bridge is a bit of an issue. What we do have to factor in and consider is that we've got to ensure that we have enough of the bridge hitting above where the track's going to be, just to be clear. So that we have factored that in. We've also looked into the things of pedestrian considerations, looking at the access, looking at mobility, and ensuring that we can inclusive for all. One of the key points that came out as well is future use. So we want to understand, what is the purpose of the bridge, and make sure that everybody understands that, what we're intending it to be. And another one is why it was actually classed as a major development. The key one for this is that actually for it to be classed as a major development, the site has to be larger for the filling plan for 1 hectare. When we look at the actual plan for Gelynis Bridge, what we're utilising, that falls below the 1 hectare. So that's why, it's no longer actually for a major development. But I do know that there has been some feedback through to Cardiff City Council, and I believe it's still going to the full planning committee anyway. Within some of the consultation, there's been some topics raised over our communication process throughout, and also the community consultation and research. One of the key things that I identify within ecology is our impact on the Taff Trail, and also the nature conservation, the provision and the protection to the local wildlife. Now we met with the community council last night, and some of the information that I'd been fed, it seems to be different to what we've actually had in our planning application. So I promise to take that away, because there's a difference from what I believe to be that the otter holt that we know had been found and around the area wouldn't actually be affected. But I suppose our planning application says otherwise. So I'm going to go and clear that up and feed that back to everyone. Some of the things in well-being. Now, hopefully, and I'm saying this very hopefully, we're all in our final lockdown and we don't have to have another one. But it is something that people are now factoring in to sit and say that those times that we can go out and walk and we can get out and actually enjoy the nature, it is critical that people still have access to the Taff Trail, because if we do have to go back into, it doesn't matter whether it's a lockdown, but it's been shown that these times are critical, for, especially for our general well-being and mental health, is to get out into the fresh air and to enjoy these walks. Obviously, there's going to be an impact in relation to the noise, and there's been some concerns related to the disruption to students locally and people obviously working from home, as a lot of us have been doing. We then look into landscape, and we can see some visual consideration on the amenities that are currently there. Potential loss of privacy, including to the southern field under the motorway. And then there's also been something that we have to look at as a consideration of any increased antisocial behaviour within the area. Now, we've touched on some of the first stuff in heritage relating to the Motte and Bailey, and we've been working with CADU closely with that. We've also been asked to look into some of the considerations because Gelynis Farm is Grade 2 listed, and that we're definitely taking that on board. There's been some concerns relating to flooding and the potential risks. What we've actually looked at, and we've done lots of analysis onto this, is that it's actually for everything that we're looking to, even with the bridge in place, there would be no noticeable effect if you had a flood that was during a 1 in 100-year event. We've also even looked at if we were to increase that to an extreme one, where it's 1 in 1,000-year event, the impact would be relatively minor, and it wouldn't actually impact on any of the properties. We then moved into a key point for me, which is the road access and HGVs. Now, as we mentioned previously, we are looking to complete our integrated traffic management plan by the end of the month. We're involving all of our principal contractors to understand all of their works coming together, so that it's not a situation where one contractor is following complying and one is not. We're ensuring that everybody is following the exact same plan. So key things that we're factoring into there is obviously the volume of traffic, the existing roads, ensuring that vehicles comply with the work and reduce the speed limits. One of the key things to that, as I said, we'll have a logistics piece of software, so we'll know when we've got each piece of HGV coming into the site and leaving the site, so that we can then control that flow coming up from queues, coming down the lane, because we know it is quite narrow. Once you get an HGV there, we don't want that up and tying that road, so it all has to be confirmed and organised. And again, we're also looking at the potential traffic on the public right of way through to Gelynis Farm. And one of the kind of good one to end on, it's very important for me, is we need to ensure public safety. That's the absolute critical thing we're doing from the very beginning, and along with our conversation with Pews, with the community councils, with Cardiff City Council, and even with the Radyr Road Safety Group. It's absolutely critical that we focus on public safety first, and then we work back to how we can get our HGVs into there and ensure that we don't have that public and vehicle interface.
Thank you. Okay. So this takes me into I'm going to just stop sharing my screen a second, sorry. Stop share, so that I can come out and read through the response to your specific questions. Okay, bear with me a second. Okay, so regarding the City Line, a number of complaints were received by Radyr residents regarding vegetation management on the City Line. On Thursday night, works were stood down. An emergency meeting was called Friday between Transport for Wales and Cardiff City Council to discuss, and a follow-up meeting was held on Tuesday this week, and we are working closely with local authorities and other stakeholders to develop our plans and take their feedback on board. So I have a statement to read which addresses your preset questions. So firstly, upgrading works to the City Line. Metro will be the biggest upgrade to public transport in South East Wales for a generation. Our current phase of transformation work will see us deliver £750 million investment to upgrade our rail infrastructure, with intermittent work taking place across the core valley lines between now and 2023. The vegetation around our railway lines has become overgrown. When Transport for Wales took over the running of the core valley lines from Network Rail, one of our first major jobs has been to cut back this overgrowth, an essential activity to ensure the safe running of passenger trains, but it's also a vital first step in preparing for the construction of Metro. We're currently cutting back a little bit further than maybe you're used to, up to 9 metres away from the track or to our boundary fence, whichever is closest across the 170 kilometres of track that make up the core valley lines. So this is because we have to have room to install the overhead line equipment that will power the brand new tram trains. And then once we've cut back the bushes and vegetation, they'll be maintained at this level in the future to make sure that our services keep running safely and smoothly. And following this vegetation management work, we'll be electrifying and upgrading the 170 kilometres of track. So in terms of timeframes, there's no final dates on the programme of works, but we will update our work in your area tracker on the website. There's dedicated pages on the website linked to Metro, and we are hoping to send out a community brochure shortly to communicate the works across the whole of the core valley lines. So moving on to your second point, which was around duty to mitigate noise disturbance and nighttime working. As a statutory undertaker, it's our duty to carry out these significant developments. We have the right to do this on our operational land without having to make a planning application or obtain consent from bodies such as local authorities around nighttime working. Whilst we'll be carrying out most of this work under these permitted development rights, again, we are working closely with local authorities and other stakeholders to develop our plans and take their feedback. We do require a variety of equipment to do this safely and swiftly, and they can include bush cutters, trimmers, chippers, chainsaws, excavators, and railroad vehicles. And when we cut back the trees, the material will either be removed from site or chipped and placed safely beside the railway, minimising risks for trespass and debris on the track, which has been an issue in the last coming weeks. So we know and understand that our work can be noisy, but we really always try to aim to do our best to minimise unnecessary noise. And obviously, in light of recent noise complaints, we've looked at some of our ways of working at night, and we'll remind our teams to refrain from shutting, shut off machines during periods when they're not being used, and take extra care when placing some of our noisiest machinery with the aim of directing this away from homes as far as possible. With regard to nighttime working, the majority of our work will be done at night, as this can only be carried out when trains are not running, and this ensures the safety of our teams, which is paramount. And due to the amount of work required, we will be working most evenings and nights on the core valley lines throughout the build of Metro. And it's also really important to raise here the fatal accident at Margam, where we, the railway industry, lost 2 colleagues who were working on an operational railway with the trains running. This has meant that in industry, we've moved away from working when the trains are in operation to reduce the possibilities of fatality injuring our staff. This does result in us having to work more nights, which we do understand is not what the line-side neighbours wish, but if we were only to do works on weekend evenings, we would not be able to complete the 170 kilometres of devegetation along our infrastructure in order to prepare for the works and the maintenance that we need to keep our railway safe. So referring to your point on the environment, natural habitats and wildlife living near the railways is really important to us, and we always look to protect the natural habitats. And we can confirm that we have an ecologist with each team on site to confirm and check prior to any devegetation work. Wherever possible, we aim our works to avoid impacts on protected species, for example, removing scrub and trees outside of nesting bird season. Due to the extent of work required to prepare for Metro, we've been unable to completely avoid undertaking the vegetation work during the nesting bird season. However, we're ensuring that the on-site ecologists are present to check the vegetation. And when there is evidence of nesting birds, the nest is buffered and works are avoided in that area with a view to complete later on in the year. We aim to improve the existing environment for wildlife, for example, retaining deadwood or creating habitat piles on site. And we'll also offset any trees we fell by planting new ones on a 2-to-1 ratio in other locations if they cannot be retained on site. And also we've created over 6 hectares of broad levelled woodland for dormice and introduced 200 dormice boxes at site in Llanwern near Newport. So coming to the resident liaison point, the best way to keep up to date with the latest Metro developments is through our website. You can follow us on social media for regular updates. And as well as post in progress updates, we also publish details of any future planned works and any disruptions these may cause, including changes to services, rail replacement bus services, and road closures. There's a contact form to raise concerns and issues that goes direct to our customer relations team, who we as a team liaise with very closely to assist in providing a response. And what we can do is make sure that we share all of the communication channels to the association in a follow-up email from today. So just to conclude really, in building the Metro, we have to strive to find a balance of delivering the project work safely and sustainable, whilst working as quickly as possible to minimise disruption wherever possible. We are keen to keep our neighbours informed at key milestones along the way, though, however, we hope you can understand there's 55,000 homes and businesses backing on or who are very close to our railway lines. And unfortunately, we are unable to completely avoid disrupting our neighbours over the course of the project. So I just really want to say thank you for your patience while we do this work. And should you wish to raise any further concerns, just please use the contact form on our website, which will raise a specific case and reference for you to be dealt with by our dedicated customer relations team. Okay. We'll just come back into Zoom. Okay, just checking my presentation to see what might be coming next. No, that's it. Let's have a look. So that can conclude our update on the compound and the update on the vegetation management on the city line.
Okay, I think there were some people that were wanting to ask questions. Certainly one of the people who raised some of the questions wanted to come in. But I think one of the questions that people were asking about were things like weekends. The city line doesn't run on a Sunday. If you really wanted to, could you not stop trains on Saturday as well? Because Transport for Wales seem to stop, there seem to be quite a number of bus replacement services whilst you're working on the lines, and you could work, all through the weekends. This would certainly, I would have thought, cut down some of the evening working, because the works here are right on top of people's houses, and it's easy to say, oh yes, we've got to do the work, but it doesn't really help the people. And I don't think you've really said much about how you can do anything to alleviate the noise that's carrying on at night for people who are obviously trying to sleep.
Okay, so with regards to accessing the railway to undertake the works, there are specific times where we are able to do that, and at the moment that's midweek nights, and we do take a huge advantage when we have what's called blockades, where we take possession of a line, and sometimes those works can happen on the weekend. So whenever that is possible, we do try to do that. But at the moment, it's only available to us to access the rail midweek nights at the moment.
If I can jump in there, please, folks. I was one of the people who sent in a letter of complaint concerning the nighttime noise for the vegetation clearance about 10 days ago. In connection with something you mentioned earlier on, Helen, as someone who some fair number of years ago used to run track safety training courses for rail track contractors personnel, I'd like to know what the situation is in relation to work being done in the old red zone conditions, where workers could work on lines where trains were operating, or could put up barriers to create a green zone where they would be safe. The other point I would make in connection with the particular situation is the fact that where people have now mentioned that the City Line operates little, if at all, at weekends, it's not an intense service anyway. And just wondering if you can give us a little bit more detail on the situation in relation to that. As I say, do I take it that Transport for Wales staff and contractors don't operate in the old red zone conditions now, and therefore it's highly unlikely that they will be able to work during the day when trains are operating, even though it's at a low level of intensity like the City Line?
I think the standard that we've adopted since we, Transport for Wales have taken over what we have, that we are not working in red zones, and this does also come and refer back to the fatality that I mentioned in the in my update. So
right, well, I sorry to cut in there, but I know some detail about that, and I think it's a little bit misleading to mention that in relation to this issue. Yes, the general purpose of worker safety, certainly, but I think it would be not quite the right avenue to go down to mention that particular incident.
Well, thank you, Ian, for raising that. That is something that I've been provided as the stakeholder manager to communicate, and I will take that on board and feed that back. I'm not sure that I was aware that the City Line was that there were no services on a Sunday, so I can definitely take that back and consider that, but I'm not quite sure how we would go about that at the moment. We are looking at our services increasing with current restrictions being considered, so we would there's a lot of considerations that need to be considered with that, but thank you for raising that with us.
I think Val Aston wanted to ask some further questions because she raised some of the questions as well. Are you there, Val?
Yes, thank you. I'm Ian. I also was one who raised a complaint about the nighttime working. I mean, to put this in context for those who are not there, my home is 10 metres from the railway. And
right, sorry to interrupt you, Val. We're about 3 metres away.
Yeah, well, yes, it is so close. This is the point, isn't it? That these houses are so close. So we're operating chainsaws literally underneath my bedroom window from 12 o'clock onwards throughout the night. I mean, I think you referred to earlier as evening work. This is not evening working. This is from 12 o'clock midnight throughout the night, the entire night. Which meant that nobody got any sleep. And then they came back the night after and did it again. And only when I went out, I got out of bed and went to talk to the people doing the work, only then was this work suspended.
My wife didn't sleep at all, and I think it was the Tuesday night.
It's interesting that the notification for this work actually came today. Thank you for the letter informing me that you were going to do the work today last week. There is an absolute failure of communication with residents here. We don't know what's going on. and we have absolutely no way of inputting to that. The idea that you can't do it during the day is utterly ridiculous. I've lived here for 8 years, and for 8 years, Network Rail have done this job, cutting vegetation back to the boundary fence during the day. The contractors I spoke to also do work for Network Rail, doing the same job during the day. This is utterly absurd. If this is your idea of mitigating disturbance, it is highly unconvincing. It is not acceptable to put residents through this night after night after night. You're talking about safety. One of my neighbours is a surgeon. Would you really like him to be operating on your head after he hasn't had any sleep for 3 days? Or a bus driver going to school? Your risk assessment has to go beyond your employees. You have to look at the health and safety of the community here, and you are not. There is no evidence that you are doing that at all. How can you possibly say you are mitigating disturbance when you don't even know what days this line runs? This is utterly unacceptable.
And just remind colleagues here in this meeting that this is a safe space to raise your concerns, and please reflect that I am the person as the stakeholder manager who is providing information to you that has been given to me. So whilst I'm extremely sympathetic and I will take on your concerns and feed them back, the update that we've been given is the points that were needed to be raised here today.
That's
and
fine.
Coming back, if I can just finish my point, thank you. The railway that we inherited was extremely overgrown in terms of vegetation, and in order to make the railway safe for our trains to run, we've had to undertake a bigger vegetation management programme, and also that will make way for the delivery of the Metro programme as well. So thank you for raising your concerns. And Kelsey,
I have sympathies with you hugely. I would be more than one of the reasons I wanted to come here today was to try and get access to somebody, because one of my difficulties is not being able to speak to any decision makers. So I fully appreciate your position, and I really don't want to cause you any unhappiness or stress. I would love to speak to actually the management who make these decisions, so that we can have a proper constructive discussion with people within, you know, who are in that position of actually of authority, and that is one of the key difficulties. This is why you're getting it in the neck, because I can't speak to your senior management. There is a real problem of communication here, and I would really appreciate your thoughts on how we can develop that dialogue with people who are in a position to actually know what's going on, and to develop their decision making.
And that's absolutely something that I can take back and raise, and we will be able to liaise with the association in how we can potentially look at that for the future. So please know that we will take that back and raise that as a potential option.
If I can just make one point back to Kelsey, who says Sunday services on the City Line, there are no services due to the COVID emergency. That's not true. There, as far as I'm aware, there are no services on the City Line on the Sunday, and that was the case before COVID. So I can't see that they're suddenly going to make a change in the near future. So I think, you know, you need to make sure you have your information on this.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that in the background we're talking to other teams at the moment to get some of your questions answered, and it's something that in light of COVID, it's something that they're discussing. I don't know what that decision will be, but if there are any changes, you know, we can inform the group, and David, we can inform you to tell the wider group here as well.
Okay, there was a question.
On another aspect, folks, if I may, David,
Yeah.
just one final point. is there in fact an issue as to whether the City line in fact has a future as a railway line? Obviously it does, because it's being used by the Metro. But as in conjunction with something Val said, our bedroom overlooks the line. We're about 3 meters or so away. It's a very sparsely patronized service. So what sort of future does it have? That's another question that someone might care to take on board, perhaps give us some information about, if there's any useful information for us.
Well, like I mentioned, we do have huge transformation projects across the whole of the core valley lines, and we are working with many communities to listen to their views, take them on board, and ensure that they're involved in that process. And I think we demonstrated that with how we were able to change our decision making and the plans around the compound. In the case of 3 to 4 months, we've reduced that hugely, and have worked with other partners to ensure that we've been able to do that. Again, we're electrifying 170 kilometres of the line, increased frames. I'm not quite sure how many per hour. We've got new tram trains coming in that are more sustainable, quieter trains. So there's definitely, a few additional points that I can get to you where some of that can be raised.
There was a question from Margaret Watt about the Gelynis Farm bridge. Margaret? Are you there, Margaret?
Sorry, I was muted.
Sorry. Yeah.
I think that what's his name, the young man, he said that there was no flooding consequence. But if you looked at the planning they put in, that there was flooding consequence with this bridge. Increased.
I'll take myself off mute. No, what we said was within the detailed flood consequence assessment and the flood modelling has been undertaken. What the flood consequence assessment has said is that there are historical records of flooding at Gelynis Farm.
No, not at all. There's not been, and I have had family here since 1903, and there has never been flooding here. So I don't know where you've got that from.
Okay, I'm only going with the assessment, again, the information that I have in front of me.
To correct that information.
Okay, I can take that away and confirm that, but it's, again, with information I'm provided, that's all the information I can currently speak with.
And that's the problem. I think they do this sitting at a desk without going there. You're working with things from a desk without actually going to the place. Anyway, there we are.
Okay, I can confirm that the modelling work was undertaken with National Resource Wales, and there was site visits undertaken. I know this because I believe we met Margaret now in a couple of times. Some of the works have been undertaken, so I will go back and raise that question. But again, that was information that we've been given with the assessment, and I understand that yourself and your family have been in the farm for many years. But I will go back and challenge that, and if I am wrong, I will come back. We'll come back and let you know.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Just looking at the time, we have time for 2 more questions.
Okay, well, Kieran Webster's got his hand up. So,
Hi, Helen. Thanks. No, I just thought I'd say something that might help with Margaret's question, and I'll be as brief as I can. National Resource Body Wales was consulted in 2019 on the plan, and they put in their acquiescence, their agreement to the ponds around the bridge to soak up any excess water because of the concrete. And you're right that about the 100-year flood risk, and Margaret's right as well. There is a local flood risk because of the culverts up in Morganstown and up in the Beechwoods and up in Morganstown. And so we did have a flood actually last year on the site. It was 2 feet deep, 3 feet deep in places. And that's because of the Teenant stream and the flooding that comes off the hill. So although the fluvial plain there is not a regularly flooded plain, and the problem is that it just infiltrates the land, which is what Welsh Water are finding. Natural Resources Body Wells didn't take into account the impact of the, although the footprint's now reducing, the macadam area, the concrete, the hard standing area of the transformation compound. So you've got a number of works going on that over 2 years, that if there was a 100-year event, would make it quite a substantial event. So that's just what I would say.
Yes, the field that you're talking about that they were going to put the stuff on and build the bridge on, that did flood, but only for a couple of hours. I think the culvert that runs under the M4 with that stream blocked, and then it unblocked and the flooding disappeared. The water actually came down the line.
Yeah,
So
I agree, Margaret, thanks.
Yeah, it's the line is the problem, where it crosses over the tap further up.
Okay, has anyone else got any questions? I'm sort of flicking through the pictures, but yes, Alan.
Hi, just to answer Kieran's question there and Margaret's, the answer is in the name. Gelynis is a corruption of the Welsh of Gelynis, which is narrow island. So Gelynis Farm is built on an island between the Taff and the stream, the Nant. So that's why there is certain flooding in those parts. Can I just say my problem was, or is, that I was very impressed with the ecological survey that you produced. It must have cost several £100,000 to do that much work, but you instantly devalued it. We are now 3.5 weeks into the bird nesting season, and you are still cutting down undergrowth. The law states quite categorically that between the 1st of March and the 15th of April, on the 15th of August, you are not allowed to do that.
So I think I did give in my environment update that we have an ecologist on site with each team, and they check any de-veg works before they carry that out.
Yeah, but
I just want to say that you know, when they track the trees, and if they do find the nests, then they move them. Just going back to yes, the nest is buffered, and then works are avoided in that area with a view to complete later on. So if the ecologist finds the bird nests as they're going through the vegetation management, it's stopped until that is protected in that area.
so how much leeway do you give to, if you find a nest, do you allow 200 meters either side of it, or 2 meters either side of it? What sort of distance? Because birds are very temperamental about nesting.
Absolutely, and I don't have that information to hand. That's not my forte, but Kelsey, I'm sure, is typing away and ensuring that we have that as a question that we can provide an update on. And I'm just looking through the chat myself, and obviously the communication element is something that has been brought up in terms of the recent noise at Radyr. Kelsey and I meet with the vegetation management team on a fortnightly basis. We go through the upcoming works, and sometimes a lot of that work moves potentially because they found a bird nest and they can't work, sometimes potentially because there's been delays in other programs. So what happened in this instance is that the works were able to start, and at that time Kelsey and I were working very tirelessly hard to make sure the communication was ready to send out to you. So in that process of communication, the request will come to myself and Kelsey as a South East Wales team. We draft the letter and communicate with our project teams, sometimes multiple teams, in order for us to gain the correct information to pre-notify our line-side neighbours. Once we've drafted the letter, it goes to review from the head of community and stakeholder engagement. It then goes off to translation, which can take sometimes 2 to 3 days, although the people that we use are very, very good in coming back to us with emergency notification letters. Then it goes on to a system where they print and get the letters ready for us, and then it's passed to Royal Mail, and we at any point where we have to get the communications out, we send them first class, and Royal Mail will do that for us. So obviously in this occasion the works did happen before we were able to communicate that, but as soon as we knew that the works were in the area potentially for a prolonged period of time, we got those newsletter, the letter out as soon as possible. But I do agree that in future what we're looking at as a team there is to make sure that when works are on hold, we keep a closer eye on when they are due to restart, so that we've got the time frame to ensure that the communication is sent out prior to the works beginning.
I can just jump in there very briefly at the end. In relation to communication, Helen, just by good fortune, I noticed a response to my complaint by email. It was lucky I spotted it about an hour before this meeting's due to start.
So that might have been because we've been working across multiple teams in order to get all the information that we need. So that's environment, from the environment, the ecologist, from you know, the project managers who are working on site, providing us updates and information, and across various directorates across Transport for Wales. So it might be that we've been able to formulate all that information today, and therefore the customer relations team have been able to provide that with you, that information to you ahead of this meeting today.
Yeah, it was sent at 5:25.
Yeah. Can I just say, Peter and Blair, I think was asking a question about the bridge. Peter, are you there? You were in the chat asking about it. You're muted, Peter. Sorry. Yeah.
I don't know why we've spent most of this meeting talking about the current removal of vegetation, when the main issue really is about the bridge and whether alternatives to the bridge have been considered. That's why I thought I was attending this meeting. And all we're talking about is current damage to birds on the removal of vegetation at the moment. We've got much bigger issues at stake here, which is the construction of a bridge, which causes amazing chaos, which is going to cause amazing chaos to traffic underneath the motorway bridge, and ongoing issues going forward for many years. I thought that's what this meeting was about.
So thank you, Peter, for raising. No, we were given an update on the Morganstown compound. Part of that, you know, Andy did talk about the bridge, but at the moment, there's a lot of things that's in the, you know, the planning application, but I think Andy will be able to say it a better way than myself, probably.
You better had to. I'm quite annoyed about the way this meeting has gone, which I thought was in relation to the main issue, the long-term bridge, which is going through planning at the moment.
So one of the things that we are doing, Peter, and we have spoken with the Community Council last night, and we spoke with Kieran, and we are obviously looking at alternatives as well. But while the planning application is still proceeding, and until we get the decision on that planning application, we will not looking to pursue anything further at the moment. If the planning application was to be not approved and it been rejected, then at that point, obviously, we would then have to go and relook at a different possible alternative for that. But at the moment, I mean, we are doing in the background some additional measures to check that. But we do feel that we have to follow the planning application and whatever basically judgment comes from that.
Thank you for clarifying that. I wasn't aware of that at all. I thought this meeting was about the bridge. Thank you.
So, Chair, if I can bring our attendance to a conclusion, we were able to stay this evening from 7:30 until 8:30. We've brought all the preset questions and have provided a response to you, and we factored in some updates that came from questions from our meeting last night with the Community Council as well. And I just really kind of want to reiterate, you know, your further concerns and issues, you know, please raise via the contact form on the website, which we will be able to provide you with details with on a follow-up email. And what I will just remind is that all the questions that have been raised tonight that have been outside of our update, we will hope to provide an update to the association chair for you to share at the later date.
Okay, well, can I say thank you to the 3 representatives for Transport for Wales for coming along tonight and actually passing out the information. Obviously you realise what sort of strength and feeling there is locally about what's going on. So just thank you very much. If you do have information, we can obviously disseminate this information locally. Quite a lot of local communication means, which I think would get to people probably faster than your system was due at the present. So,
well, thank you for offering that, and that is definitely something that we will consider for the future. So much appreciated.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for coming along tonight.
Okay, nice to meet you all. Bye.
Okay.